Hello, you have reached Why We Are Christians, and my name is Katie Philpott. And again, you might be expecting my husband Kent Philpott, but I'm here because I am with a very special friend of mine, Michelle Shelfer. And we are here because, for the second time, we are looking at the ministry and book that she has created, Prepare a Room, A Path to Peace and Healing for Those Hurt by Abortion. Now we have decided that we're going to tell our own stories. Yes, we are both women in our later years, and yes, we are both women who have abortions in our past. We each had an abortion. I have one real child, and I even had another pregnancy, but it wasn't aborted. It was a ruptured ectopic. I almost died. So that was a really big deal for me. So in 3 pregnancies, I have one really wonderful son, and the abortion came about when I was 20 years old. So this is, now you'll guess my age, this was 50 years ago. My teenage years were invested with the hippie cultures just starting. So in 1967, I remembered jumping up and down with glee. Oh boy, they just threw out all of the rules. And so that started me on about an 8-year course of promiscuity and just experimenting with this and experimenting with that and not having really any fun in any of it. And I kind of was rebellious. My parents and my teachers and the school authorities, where I was doing fine, wanted me to go to an Ivy League college, something like Brown or Smith or whatever, and I would have gotten in, I'm sure. Everyone from my prestigious high school got into whatever college they wanted. But I just kept saying, no, I'm going to art school. I don't need to go to college. I'm going to art school. So I talked everyone into the fact that I was going to art school, and there I was in Philadelphia, downtown, in the midst of them having removed all the rules. I had thought that was wonderful. So a year later, there I am without any rules, without any guidance on how to live a life. So into my life came drugs and sex and rock and roll, along with the art school. But that's what art school was all about. It was kind of that vagabond, bohemian, hippie lifestyle. And I'm sure we will hear some correlation here with your story.
A lot of similarity.
And I found myself living in kind of a commune place, which was very run down. It was on South Street in downtown Philadelphia. And I had a boyfriend there, and sooner or later I forgot what I was supposed to do with my birth control, and sure enough, I started feeling queasy and sick, and nobody knew what it was. Everybody was a little bit stupid then. I mean, we're laughing about it, but it was not fun at all.
Yeah.
And this was after having gone to the OBGYN for a birth control method, and he did not give me very good advice. I won't go into the details, but that after his advice is when I ended up pregnant, and after his prescribing something that he didn't tell me how to use it right. And so I didn't use it right, and so I end up pregnant. And then, since it's 1970, and this is 3 years before Roe v. Wade, at least in Pennsylvania, they had what they called a therapeutic abortion provision. Mm-hmm. But that meant that I had to write a letter. Each of my parents had to write letters. I had to go see 2 psychiatrists who had to write letters to like this review board. The hospital had to accept me. We had to pay a lot of money for all of this to happen. And of course, the abortionist was this same OBGYN. And so everybody made lots of money off of my big boo-boo. But my attitude was absolutely like there was no counseling that, well, we can help you go through to term and you can give your child for adoption even. No, in all of those psychiatrists and counselors and stuff, nobody even gave one little fig of a care about advising me to keep the child. It was just like perfunctory. Oh, yeah, you're here to do this process? Oh, yeah, okay, fine. They'll talk to me for 10 minutes and then they sign the thing and they ask for a lot of money. But my own attitude was, there's no way. I mean, I'm not going to stop my life for this, for a child. What am I supposed to move back with my parents and have them help me raise a child? What kind of life would that be for this child anyway? I can't do that. You know, I'm off to more art school, or I'm off to this, or I'm off to that. I can't stop and do this. This won't work. So it's not like I was even thinking that much about the child. Now, it's true that my own first cousin was pregnant at the same time, and I found out that her due date was in the same month as my due date would have been. And so all these years later, I look at her son, who's 50 years old, and I say, okay, my child would be like that age. Maybe my child would be something like her son, or So I have always followed him as a reminder. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know that, you know, I have any connection in my own mind and heart with who he is as compared to what would have been. And so, yeah, there's always been a little kind of empty place. But I've never felt like I had to work on it too much. It was stupidity, it was arrogance, it was selfishness, it was naivete, it was all of those things. I'm aware of it. I can't change that.
So how did you get from I could care less to this is something that I want to deal with?
'Cause it never goes away. I mean, it wasn't that I could care less. It's just that at the time, so I'm 20 years old, at the time it was like, I'd better not I'd better not care very much, or I'd get too confused. I'm going through this process. I'm going to follow it through. I'm going to do what they say I should do in order to get rid of this problem.
Yeah.
So that was my attitude, but when you go on for decades in which you kind of secretly looking at your cousin's son, wondering what your child would be like if now he or she were that age, you know, you're just telling yourself, okay, it doesn't go away. It will always be there. Now, I don't have to get like miserable over it. It's not, I don't think, ruining my life, but you know, it's just one of these things. It's always there. For me, it takes a similar place as I had a falling out with a good friend in the same year, and I sure wish I hadn't. And I've never been able to come back into relationship with that person.
Yeah.
And I continue to think about that over all these years. I wish that was different.
You might call it a brokenness.
Yeah, there's a brokenness there.
Yeah.
So that's my story. You know, I have more actual pain over the lost child that I wanted the pregnancy
Oh,
that
the miscarriage.
well,
or
it was the
ectopic.
ectopic pregnancy that really kind of blew up, not just internally, but
Yeah.
blew up my life more or less at that
Yeah.
moment.
Well, that's actually one of the consequences of abortion.
Yeah.
Is scarring, internal scarring, that can lead to miscarriage. I also had a life-threatening ectopic pregnancy and a miscarriage, so I have 5 pregnancies, of which I have 2 live children. But that's, yeah, when you wanted it, then you couldn't have it because there was a scarring going on that had taken place that prevented that from happening.
Yeah, and it's really not clear as to where the scarring came from. It could have been a chlamydia infection. I mean, but probably it had to do with the lifestyle somehow or another.
Yeah.
That kind of recklessness that we never consider what we're doing to ourselves emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychologically.
Well, I think you really said it when you said that you had all this freedom. Suddenly, all the rules were lifted and you had total freedom to do what you wanted, but it was no fun.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Like the pursuit of pleasure was no longer pleasurable.
It wasn't.
And I think a lot of these freedoms that women have are not good for us. They're not good for us at all.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of desperation about it rather than pleasure.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of looking for love in all the wrong places type desperation.
And it does generally end up in failure of one sort or another, failure of relationships, failure because you get involved with the drug scene and then you're doing all kinds of harm to yourself.
Right, so I guess, you know, I've had a hard time deciding, do I want to actually go through this whole process? No, I think we should be honest about how even those of us who are very aware of ourselves, you know, it may take a while before I actually get to the place where I'm ready to literally sit down and write out all of the
You read it as my friend.
I read it as your friend.
And because I wrote a book and you want to read my book. And
yeah, right.
because you've had a similar experience to mine and you want to see where I'm coming from and what I'm doing and what my strategy is. And not necessarily because you want to dig in yourself to the process.
Yeah. So I guess I would like to acknowledge people who think they've got it covered. You know, you think you've dealt with it even, you think you're even able to counsel others. Maybe you're thinking more of a friend who needs this than yourself, even though you also had an abortion. So I guess I'll give myself as the example of, well, just, you know, don't be so quick to shut the door, to wrap it all up, to judge one way or the other.
Yeah. We were talking in the green room about how a lot of times it's not the person, him or herself, who recognizes the need to go through a process, to process hurt feelings and wounds from an abortion. Sometimes it's your mom or your friend or the one who's known you since you were 16, who's been able to sort of see you and has that certainty. This is what I've been hearing from readers, is that I need to give this to so-and-so. She doesn't even know how affected she is, but I can see it clearly. That would be the person to buy the book for her friend. Okay, can we segue into your story? I'm just going to leave it up to you to figure how to tell your story and how your past, you know, the abortion story and the things surrounding it led to what you've been doing in terms of a counseling ministry and then into the book and your real Sure. Well, my story begins with a secular Jewish upbringing. My parents were bohemian artists in San Francisco, and they really were intent on raising me without any guide rails at all. We didn't have a biblical Judeo-Christian morality at work in our household. We had an artistic household in which I was encouraged to express my creativity, and I was told I could grow up and do whatever I wanted, and you go girl, you can do it all. And not only that, but the key to all of it was to explore my sexual freedom. And that was that was taught to me by my parents, and it was certainly expected of me that I would go out there and sow my wild oats. And that's exactly what I did. My story then overlaps with Katie's story in many ways, in that there were no rules. I was, even as a teenager, under-supervised. Now, overlay on that a culture in which the women's movement is just starting to blossom, and feminism is becoming a very strong voice in the culture. Even in my high school, there were people coming in from the local pregnancy center to make sure that all the girls had all the contraceptives that they need so that they could have all the sex that they wanted without worrying about consequences. And that's the kind of culture I was raised in. So I was actually...
and what town was this?
Berkeley, California.
Woo-hoo!
Where else? The capital of unruliness. Okay. So when I got pregnant with a man whom I barely knew, it was the most natural thing in the world to make an abortion appointment. And I really felt that I was stepping into that signature defining event that makes a woman, that defines who we are as autonomous, independent women. I gave it no more thought than if I had been going to have my teeth cleaned. And when I got to the clinic, I sat around with a bunch of women, and I was very flip. I was didn't take it at all seriously. And then I was brought into a room for the actual procedure, and I was told that it would not hurt. It was going to be so quick and easy. Everything was just going to be fine. And what happened to me was that I discovered that the man who was conducting the abortion lied to me, because it was not only not painful, it was excruciatingly painful. It was the most painful thing I had ever experienced in my life. And then I began to notice in the clinic, after the thing was over and I was in shock from the pain, I began to notice that no one would make eye contact with me. No one was interested in consoling me. No one was interested in talking to me at all. They were really trying to get me out of there as quickly as possible. And when I veered out to leave in the front the way I came in, they were like, no, you go this way out the back. They shuffled me down the back stairs, and there I was in the parking lot. And I realized from that, just those few moments, I realized that the whole thing was a big lie. And my whole worldview came crumbling down in a matter of moments, and I was utterly shattered. Not only shattered that the things that I had believed turned out to be wrong, I felt an enormous, immediate sense of such betrayal by the ideology of the women's movement. But I also realized that I had taken a life. I didn't trust anybody's judgment on that anymore. I was not willing to say and go along with the idea that this was no big deal. This was a big deal. I had made a huge mistake. And to show you just how casually my boyfriend and I thought about this thing, he just dropped me off and he went and did some errands. He was going to come pick me up. We just thought this was going to be no big deal at all. Or he didn't drop me off, actually. I drove myself. So I was alone. I was alone. I was tears streaming down my face. And then an extraordinary thing happened there in the parking lot of the abortion clinic. And that is that as I walked toward my car, there was something shiny on the ground right outside the door of my car. Something colorful that caught my eye even through the tears. And I bent down and picked it up, and it was an amazing moment for me, because it really seemed as though someone were speaking to me. This little thing that I picked up was a lapel pin, a metal lapel pin, such as you would be given at a birthday party or something like that. It said, "He careth for you." And it pictured a mother bird with her wings outstretched over her chicks. And in that moment, the word careth, kind of as a biblically ignorant young Jewish girl, I recognized that was God's language. He careth for you. It really felt at that moment that God had reached down out of heaven in my darkest moment to tell me that he cared about me. And although I didn't know God, and I didn't come to know him for many years. This was his first introduction, and he really impressed me in that moment. I clung to that message. I clung to it for years, even before I knew him. So that was my abortion experience. And then I have another experience that followed that just a few months later, which is that because my boyfriend and I, you know, Katie talked about how stupid we were in those days. We were stupid. We didn't know any better. So what did I do? We just went back to having sex in the same way we were having sex again and living together. We were living in a bus in the middle of Texas. We got pregnant again within a matter of months. And so I made another appointment because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to do. I lacked the imagination or I lacked the intelligence to be able to think that there might be other options, and there was no one there to tell me that there was anything else I could do. So I made yet another appointment. Now the interesting thing that happened was that the night before that appointment, we began to get alarming signals that something was wrong, because my boyfriend began to have vomiting and diarrhea, purging, in terrible pain all night long. We didn't sleep a wink all night. And so in the morning we went out and we went to this abortion appointment. Now we were in Corpus Christi, the Body of Christ, Texas. And outside the clinic, there was a little cluster of ladies. No, they weren't yelling at me, "God hates abortion." No, they were perfectly silent. They were just praying for me. They were just standing there praying. And I went in and I sat down. This time there wasn't a cluster of ladies, there was just me and myself. The first miracle that occurred was that the abortionist took an hour extra beyond my appointment time with the prior patient. I hope that person was okay. But in that hour that I was sitting there by myself in perfect solitude, I had a change of heart, and I came to a willingness. Regardless of whether the boy married me or not, I was going to have this child. I was going to lay aside my life, lay aside my plans. I wasn't going to do what I planned to do. I was going to make room in my life for this child. And that is my almost abortion. And the almost abortion is in many ways more painful than the abortion, because every time I see my 37-year-old son, which we just got back from a visit last week, I'm reminded of what almost didn't happen. If I had been a little more headstrong, if there hadn't been people praying out front, if the abortionist hadn't taken an hour with the prior patient, maybe this precious young man who is my son, who is the loving husband of a beautiful wife who's pregnant with their 6th child, maybe none of that would have happened. And that can be a very stinging, painful thought. So I did. As I say, then we had another child that we just finished the story. There's actually one more little piece that's fairly important. So as I sat there, I made the decision to have this child. So I rushed to the receptionist, got my money back, and just as I was getting my money back, this boy, who was my boyfriend, rushed in the room and said, "You didn't do it yet, did you? Get out of here. Let's go. We got to get out of here." And we jumped in the car, and right there in the parking lot of that abortion clinic, my now husband proposed to me. And we just had these big old grins on our faces as we drove away with a complete ignorance about what our future held, but some small measure of faith that whatever it was going to include this child. We were going to get married, and we were going to make a go of it. And we've been married now for, let's see, this month it will be 38 years,
Woo!
Which I have to say is actually statistically very unusual. Most relationships do not survive abortion, which is another indication that it is an impactful
very impactful,
event.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
We have a ministry that has now developed.
Yes.
And
the ministry,
just tell us about the ministry.
Okay. Well, the ministry is a sort of a multimedia ministry. It includes the book. We have a CD. We have a little 4-minute animated film. We have the Foundlings, which is a collection of drawings that are drawn on a daily basis. I'm honoring the 1.72 billion children who have been lost to abortion by drawing one per day and picturing them as if they had lived. And one of the reasons that I'm doing that is that the child that I aborted was very important in bringing me to peace and healing. So I'm hoping that these children will, we say, act as we ambassadors of God's grace and forgiveness.
Okay, so where else can we
Yes.
find, I'm going to say this again, where can we find your book? Like if we want to go buy it, where can we go to buy it?
Yes, you can go to my website, preparearoom.com. You can go to Amazon. You can go to the publisher directly, which is Nordskog Publishing, Nordskog Publishing.com.
Nordskog. Okay, and what else do you have on your website again?
We've got a little 4-minute animated film from the point of view of an aborted child.
Oh, is it the
speaking to a
one that
mom.
you made several years ago?
Yes, it's called Broken.
Yes, it's wonderful.
We have a CD of songs that are written specifically with women and men in mind who need healing from abortion.
Yes, and here we have not just a fabulous editor, writer, artist, but also musician, songwriter. Oh my goodness, the list of things that you can do.
Well, the Lord is pruning me now, whittling me down.
Whittling you down.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so do you want to give an email address?
Sure, Michelle at preparearoom.com.
Okay.
If you want to contact me.
And I'm imagining that there will be women who want to maybe start support groups.
Yes, this is suitable for women's groups. It's suitable for bringing to your church for church use, or you might want to give it as a gift, or 2 or 3 copies as a gift to your local pregnancy crisis center.
And it's kind of like a workbook format as well. You're asking questions, you're asking people to fill in their answers, to take notes, to really do some real work.
Yes.
In the 1 minute left, tell us about Greatest Love again.
Again,
I'd love to hear about it.
Because it is a wonderful thing. It is at the heart of our healing process, I believe, because it allows us to learn to love the way God loves. And He has given His love freely. He has given His love even unto death, to lay aside His life that we might have new life. He's laid aside His riches that we might be rich. And when we start to slowly learn, it's a very difficult discipline to practice greatest love, but we have a wonderful example in Jesus. And when we learn to do that, it really does change every relationship, but it certainly will also change the relationship that we have with our lost child.
Amen. So at this point, I say thank you for joining us for Why We Are Christians, and we hope to see you again next time. So long.